My parents pretended to love me for my money. My parents tried to manipulate me for financial gain, so I let them. In fact, I played their game so well that I gave them more than they ever bargained for. Now, my mother is at my doorstep, demanding money I don't technically have, not knowing that she has just made the biggest, most catastrophic mistake of her life by underestimating the son she raised to be invisible. It all started with a simple, desperate need for love. When I was 6 years old, I got up at 5 a.m. one Saturday morning. The house was dark and silent, the only sound the low hum of the refrigerator. With the intense, singular focus that only a small child can muster, I cleaned the entire house before my parents woke up. I wiped down the sticky kitchen counters, I dusted the coffee table, even arranged the throw pillows on the couch, just so. I did it all for one reason, one desperate, burning want: for them to be proud of me, for them to look at me, really see me, and just once tell me that they loved me. When it finally came downstairs hours later, I was standing in the middle of the sparkling living room, my small chest puffed out with pride, exhausted but vibrating with hope. They just looked blankly at me, then glanced around the clean room without a flicker of expression, and then turned on the TV. My dad, without taking his eyes off the morning cartoons, just told me to go change my shirt because it was damp with sweat. That single memory is a perfect summary of my entire relationship with my parents. I was a ghost in my own home, a household appliance that sometimes spoke. I spent my entire childhood performing, constantly trying to earn a single scrap of affection. I did everything for them. I got perfect grades. I never got into trouble. I'd even go as far as mowing lawns for all the neighbors on our street during the hot summer weekends, my hands raw and blistered, just to save up enough money to take us all out for a family dinner every Sunday. I'd sit there, watching them eat the food I had paid for with my own sweat, and they would barely even acknowledge me, talking to each other over my head as if I wasn't there. I cannot recall a single time, not once in my entire life, that either of them looked me in the eye and said, "I love you." By far, the biggest shock, the moment that finally shattered my childish hope that they might one day change, came when I was enrolling in college 5 years ago. I was 18, and I'd gotten into a good local university on a scholarship. I was so excited. When I told them, they exchanged a look, and then my parents told me they wanted me to go to college out of state. For a split second, I felt that old, familiar flicker of hope. Maybe they thought it was a better school. Maybe they wanted the best for me. But then my dad clarified, his voice flat and devoid of emotion. "So you can finally be out of our lives." The words hung in the air, cold and sharp. I felt the floor drop out from under me. I couldn't help it. I teared up right there in front of them, a silent, hot tear tracing a path down my cheek. My dad just looked at me with pure disgust and told me to man up and stop crying. That night, I packed my bags, whatever I could fit into a few duffel bags, and moved into my friend's place for the summer. But despite feeling crushed, utterly broken by their final, definitive rejection, I felt a small, unfamiliar sense of happiness, of lightness. Being kicked out was my first real step towards healing. It was the first time I fully accepted that their love was a prize I would never win, because it was never actually on offer to begin with. Fast forward to last May. I was graduating from college. I was 23 years old and in a much, much better place mentally. The 5 years away from them had been transformative. With the help of a great therapist and the unwavering support of my chosen family of friends, I had gone from the shy, anxious, depressed, people-pleasing teenager who would do anything for a crumb of affection, to a much more confident, self-assured young man who finally knew his own worth. And then my parents shocked me one last time, but this time, it seemed to be in a positive light. They reached out to me. An email, the first communication in over 2 years. The subject line was just my name. They said they were proud of me and asked if they could attend my college graduation. I actually teared up when I read that. My therapist had talked a lot about healing my inner child, and in that moment, I felt him, the little 6-year-old who just wanted a pat on the head, finally being seen. We hadn't spoken in years, but it still felt every bit as surreal and amazing as I had always dreamed. The validation I had craved my entire life was finally here. I was so blinded by that old, desperate hope that I didn't even consider the possibility of this being a power play or some kind of manipulation on their part. I immediately replied yes, saying I'd love nothing more than for them to be there. I even offered to pay for their flights and hotel, but they politely refused, saying it was their treat, their gift to me. I didn't realize at the time, but my graduation day was the calm before the storm. It was perfect. My parents applauded as I walked across the stage to receive my diploma. I saw my mother wipe away a tear. I even gave them a shout out in my speech, and I teared up while doing it because seeing them there in the audience, smiling at me, meant so much. I thought this was it. This was the turning point. We were finally going to be a real family. Then, 4 days after my graduation, I got another email from my mom. I saw her name in my inbox and felt my heart race, genuinely thinking it was a follow-up, a message about how wonderful it was to see me an actual attempt to rebuild our fractured relationship. But instead, the email contained a single attachment. It was a receipt, an itemized receipt, like something you'd submit for a business expense report, naming every single cost they incurred to attend my graduation. Round-trip flight tickets, 5 nights at a luxury downtown hotel, daily breakfast charges, bottles of wine from the hotel bar, Uber rides to and from dinner, everything. At the bottom of the long list was the grand total. They demanded I cover their entire trip, the entire $3,235. There wasn't anything else in the email. No congratulations. No, it was great seeing you. Just a bill for their presence. I stared at my screen like a deer in headlights. My stomach twisted into a tight, painful knot, and a wave of nausea washed over me. My roommate, Tyler, found me sitting there in the dark, my face beet red, my fist angrily banging the table over and over, just seconds away from letting out a primal scream. I felt so many emotions at once. White-hot rage, a soul-crushing betrayal, deep humiliation, and a profound, bottomless sadness. The money wasn't even the real issue. I had the money saved up for my part-time jobs. The issue was the cold, calculated cruelty of it all. The issue was that I had specifically asked my parents if they wanted me to pay for the tickets in the first place, and they had refused. They had deliberately lured me in with the promise of love and acceptance, just to slap me with a bill for their performance. At first, that old familiar instinct kicked in. I wanted to blame myself. That was my default setting, the one they had carefully installed in me as a child. I must have done something wrong, something to deserve this. But the more I thought about it, the angrier I became. The very next day, after an impromptu emergency session with my therapist where I laid out the whole sordid story, I made a decision. I wrote them a check for the exact amount, $3,235. I even added one extra dollar, a petty little cherry on top, and in the memo line of the check I wrote, "Thank you for attending." But that's not all I did. I also sent them a message. A long, scathing, no-holds-barred message where I let everything out. I reminded them of how I used to cry myself to sleep as a little boy because of their neglect. I reminded them of how I paid off my dad's entire car loan when I was just 16, using money from my grueling job at a fast food joint, hoping it would finally get them to appreciate me. I reminded them of every birthday they forgot, every school play they missed, every time I came home with an award and they didn't even look up from the TV. I called their behavior what my therapist had taught me to call it, emotional abuse. And then, at the very end of the letter, I planted a seed. A beautiful, glorious, vengeful lie. I told them that in the past couple of years, I had secretly become a self-made millionaire through savvy crypto investments. I told them that before receiving their email, I was planning on buying them a lavish, all-expenses-paid trip to Europe, just the two of them, as my way of saying thank you for coming to my graduation. But now, not only were they not getting the holiday, they were also not getting the beautiful house I had secretly planned to buy for them when my dad retired in a few years. I even threw in a bunch of fancy-sounding crypto jargon I found on the internet, talking about blockchain diversification and NFT portfolios to really sell the story. Then, with a deep, satisfying breath, I hit send. And after sending the check and the message, I blocked them both on every platform I could think of. I honestly didn't know what to expect. At first, there was silence. Complete radio silence. For a few days, I thought maybe, just maybe, they had gotten the message and would leave me alone. But then, of course, the messages started flooding in from numbers I didn't recognize. My parents had mobilized the troops. My aunts, my uncles, cousins I hadn't spoken to in a decade, everyone was bombarding me, calling me selfish, an asshole, a disgrace to the family. But there was one particular message that made my blood run cold. It was from my mom, sent from my cousin's phone. "We're flying over to your house now. You better have answers prepared." A wave of pure panic washed over me. I frantically checked the flight schedules online, and there it was, a flight from their city, scheduled to arrive in just 3 hours. I called Tyler, my voice shaking, to warn him about my parents' impending ambush, but my phone died right as the call connected. Just my luck. I grabbed my charger and ran to my car, immediately getting stuck in the thick, unmoving sludge of afternoon rush hour traffic. Every red light felt like an eternity of torture as my anxiety spiraled. I kept imagining the confrontation, what they might do, what they might say. How could I possibly handle facing them again after everything? When I finally got to our apartment, my worst fears had come true. My parents were already there, sitting on our couch as if they owned the place. Tyler was there too, perched uncomfortably on the edge of an armchair, looking like he'd been trapped in an awkward hostage situation for far too long. But the weird thing was, my parents didn't look angry. They looked pleasant, almost cheerful, and that scared me more than if they'd been screaming. "There he is," my mom said, her voice bright and chirpy as she stood up to give me a hug. I stood stiffly as she wrapped her arms around me, the cloying scent of her perfume making me feel sick. "We've been having such a nice chat with your lovely friend Tyler." Tyler shot me a desperate look over her shoulder that clearly screamed, "Help me." What are you doing here? I asked, pulling away from my mom's hollow, theatrical embrace. Sweetie, there's been a huge misunderstanding about the graduation expenses, my mom said, her voice dripping with a fake, syrupy concern that made my skin crawl. We never, ever meant for you to think we were actually charging you. It was just our silly way of showing you how much we spent to be there for your special day, to show you how much we love you. As she was spinning this ridiculous tale, I noticed my dad wasn't looking at me. He was subtly angling his phone around the apartment, pretending to check his messages, but I could clearly see him taking pictures. I watched him take snapshots of our living room, the kitchen beyond, even zooming in on a stack of mail on the counter by the door. Dad, are you taking pictures of our apartment? I interrupted my mom's monologue, my voice sharp. What? No, of course not. Just checking my emails, he said quickly, shoving his phone deep into his pocket and looking guilty. Tyler seized his opportunity to escape. I just remembered I have to meet some friends for a study group, he said, standing up a little too quickly. Text me when you're done here, he added, giving me a meaningful look before grabbing his jacket and practically fleeing out the door. The second that door clicked shut behind Tyler, my parents' demeanor changed in a literal split second. The pleasant, concerned masks dropped, revealing the cold, hard faces I knew so well. My dad leaned forward, elbows on his knees, his face a thundercloud. You've caused quite a stir in the family with your disgusting lies, he said, his voice low and menacing. Everyone thinks you're some kind of ungrateful, spoiled millionaire who's refusing to help his poor, aging parents. You could fix this, my mom added, her voice now sharp and demanding, all traces of the sweet, concerned mother gone. If you just helped us out a little financially, we could tell everyone it was all just a big misunderstanding. And that's when it clicked. The whole performance, the flight, the fake smiles, this wasn't about the graduation bill at all. This was about the lie. The beautiful, glorious lie I'd told about being wealthy. It swallowed it hook, line, and sinker. I'm not a millionaire, I said flatly, looking them both in the eye. I made that all up because I was hurt and angry about the bill you sent me. My dad let out a short, sharp snort of a laugh. Right, of course. We've seen your social media, son. The fancy restaurants, the little weekend trips. You're doing very, very well for yourself, and you're not sharing it with your family. That's not how we raised you. They've been stalking my social media this whole time. Those posts were mostly from work events paid for by my company or cheap day trips where a carload of us would split gas money. But from the outside, filtered through their lens of greed, I guess it could look like a more lavish lifestyle. Look, my dad said, his voice suddenly softening into the slick, oily, manipulative tone I knew all too well from my childhood, the one he always used right before he asked for something. Let's start fresh. We're your parents. We love you. We're thinking a small loan. Just a little something to help us get our retirement fund back on track. Say $50,000? That's nothing for someone in your position. I just stared at them, a cold, dead calm settling over me. I'm not giving you money, I said, my voice quiet but firm. I don't have that kind of money to give you. And even if I did, the answer would still be no. My mom's face changed instantly. The pleading, manipulative smile vanished, replaced by the cold, dead-eyed look I knew from every time I had ever disappointed her as a child. We can make things very, very difficult for you, she said, her voice a low hiss. Your employer might be interested to hear about that little trouble with the law you had as a teenager. I never had any trouble with the law, I said, genuinely confused. They don't know that, my dad replied with a smug, triumphant little smirk. I remembered what my therapist had told me. Document. I subtly touched the side button on my smartwatch, starting an audio recording. I'm recording this conversation, I said calmly, my eyes locked on theirs. If you're threatening to lie to my employer and blackmail me, I'd like to have that on record. Their expressions changed faster than flipping a light switch. Suddenly, they were just two concerned parents again, shocked and hurt by their son's accusations. My dad stood up, making flustered excuses about needing to get back to their hotel. As I headed toward the door, I saw my dad's hand snake out and casually palm my spare house key from the little decorative bowl on the entry table. Put that back, I said firmly, my voice leaving no room for argument. He feigned surprise, holding up the key as if he'd just picked it up by accident, and reluctantly returned it to the bowl. They were almost out the door when my mom suddenly clutched at her chest, her face contorting in a mask of agony, and collapsed dramatically against the wall. My heart, she gasped, sliding slowly down to the floor. I think I'm having a heart attack. I panicked. For a split second, all the anger and resolve vanished, replaced by the primal, gut-wrenching fear of a child seeing their parent in pain. I called 911 immediately. The operator asked me a series of calm, procedural questions about my mom's condition while I watched her writhing theatrically on our entryway floor. My dad knelt beside her, his face a mask of genuine worry, which made me second-guess myself. What if this was real? What if my stress and my coldness toward them had actually triggered a medical emergency? The guilt hit me like a ton of bricks, even as a small, cynical part of my brain screamed that this was all just another performance. The paramedics arrived within minutes, their presence filling the small apartment. Two EMTs rushed in with their equipment while I stood back, my own heart racing. They quickly and professionally checked her vitals, asked her a series of questions, and did a quick examination. One of them pulled me aside while the other continued checking on my mom. "Has your mother had any heart problems in the past?" he asked, his voice calm and professional. I don't know. I admitted, a fresh wave of shame washing over me. "We're not very close." The paramedic just nodded without a hint of judgment and returned to my mom. After a few more minutes of examination, they helped her sit up against the wall. The female EMT explained, in a very patient and slightly weary tone, that all of my mom's vitals were perfectly normal and that this appeared to be a severe anxiety attack, not a cardiac event. Like magic, my mom's condition improved dramatically once she realized her performance wasn't going to get her a trip to the hospital and the attention she craved. She waved away their suggestions to follow up with her doctor, saying she felt much, much better already. The paramedics left after having her sign a refusal of care form, and I was once again alone with my two perfectly healthy parents. "You need to leave," I said, my voice shaking with a cold, quiet fury as I stood by the open door. "Now!" My dad helped my mom to her feet, and as he passed me, he gave me a look that chilled me to the bone. "This isn't over," he said quietly, his voice a low growl. "Family takes care of family. Remember that." I didn't respond. I just held the door open until they finally walked through it. Then I shut it, locked it, bolted it, and slid down to the floor with my back pressed hard against the wood. I was shaking from head to toe. The war had just come to my front door. I immediately called Tyler and told him it was safe to come home. While I waited, I went online and ordered new, high-security, pick-proof lock for our door for same-day emergency installation. When Tyler got back, he helped me install them. He had also, on his own initiative, gone out and bought a basic security camera for our front door. As we were setting it up, both of us were jumpy, flinching at every little noise from the hallway. "Dude, your parents are something else entirely," Tyler said as we tested the camera's motion alerts on our phones. "Your mom spent a solid 20 minutes trying to convince me that I was secretly gay and a corrupting influence on you. She kept asking all these weirdly personal questions about our friendship and our finances." "Yeah, that sounds about right," I groaned, rubbing my temples. "Thanks for dealing with them until I got here." "No problem," he said, his expression serious. "But seriously, man, are you okay? This is next level messed up." Before I could even answer, my phone pinged with a fraud alert notification from my bank. My heart sank as I quickly logged into my account on my laptop. Someone had attempted to access my checking account using my personal information. The attempt had been flagged and blocked because it originated from an IP address in a different state, my parents' home state. "They're trying to get into my bank account," I said, my voice hollow as I turned the laptop screen toward Tyler. "What? Can he even do that?" he asked, his eyes wide with disbelief. "They know my social security number, my birthday, my mother's maiden name, probably the name of my first pet, and all the other stupid security questions," I said, feeling sick to my stomach. "They're my parents. They know everything about me." I spent the next hour on the phone with my bank's fraud department, freezing all of my accounts and setting up new, much more complex security measures, including verbal passwords that only I would know. I also went online and froze my credit with all 3 major credit bureaus just to be safe. While I was in the middle of this financial lockdown, my phone rang with a blocked number. Against my better judgment, I answered and put it on speaker so Tyler could hear. It was my dad. There was no greeting. "We know people who can make problems for you," he said, his voice cold and flat, devoid of any emotion. "Computer people. People who can access things you think are private. You should think about that before you continue to refuse to help your own family." I hung up without responding and immediately saved the chilling voicemail. The next morning, I took the recording of their threats from the previous day and the new voicemail to the police station. I filed a detailed report for attempted identity theft, blackmail, and harassment. The officer who took my report was sympathetic but frustratingly realistic. "Family disputes are complicated," he said with a tired sigh, handing me a report number. "Without concrete proof that they were the specific individuals who attempted to access your account, there's not much we can do on that front besides take the report. But keep documenting everything." I left feeling defeated, but at least I had started a paper trail. When I got home and checked the mail, I found a new horror, a stack of letters containing pre-approved credit card offers in my name that I hadn't requested. This confirmed my suspicions. My parents had somehow gotten their hands on my personal information, likely from stealing mail during one of their unannounced visits before we changed the locks and installed the camera. The war was escalating, moving from emotional manipulation to outright criminal activity. They were no longer just trying to get money. They were actively trying to destroy the life I had so carefully built without them. But they had forgotten one crucial detail. The neglected little boy who spent his life desperately trying to please them was gone. In his place was a man who had nothing left to lose and everything to fight for. The game was on.